Frank and Sherry, do I need to do anything?
Talk.
What about devices?
You're fine.
Really?
I'll take care of
Wow. Technology is even better when I don't have to do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, welcome everyone. This is to me a very interesting period. And it is very sad, as Frank has pointed out, but a very interesting one nonetheless. I took an interest in it in part because the time frame, I actually knew people who lived then. Think about it. You may have had parents or grandparents who lived in World War I or the 20s and 30s, and you may have been like I did and annoyed them enough to make them talk about it and said, what, they kept on and on. I said, just have a couple of more questions, and it's like I found it so fascinating to hear about all of that from their perspective. Now, that doesn't mean that life in Middle Georgia in the 1930s would be what we're talking about today, but you get the idea that it's something that many of us can connect to in terms of the experiences of our forebearers. And that makes it interesting too. I try to make this a European history course, but by the 20th century, it's really impossible to ignore the rest of the world, isn't it? So we will have to come to it, and I'll have to give it its time. But at the same time, I will attempt to focus on the major areas of Europe, because this is, of course, on Europe and its diplomacy, or as one person put it, the people who are trained to go to someone else's country and lie for you. It's, if you ever thought about a diplomatic career, you do really have to be not only a person with great knowledge and tact, but you also have to know how to pull stuff over on folks. And some of us are better than others. I can think of some students who might have told a story, shall we say. Well, but that is not relevant. Sherry, I think we are ready. I am going to do what I would hope was a disciplined approach, meaning not continue to babble, because I could talk about each of these points for hours and hours, but I got to let it go or I'll never finish. And you will be very unhappy with me. And I can't afford a bad evaluation because I'm trying to keep a job. You know what I mean? It's like, you understand. These are in no particular order of interest what I would consider to be the major areas of concern. But as Frank pointed out, there's so many areas of interest in the 19th and early 20th centuries, areas of improvement, and not just wars, because we've had wars throughout history, so that's not exactly an innovation, is it? People killing each other. But in terms of art and music, science, and all the rest. However, for our purposes, let us note, of course, the continuation of industrialization, and for what it's worth, the cities continue to grow. And of course, we're all, I guess, thinking about the United Kingdom today. Scotland, and who could imagine some of the places up there would become great urban centers? but they certainly did during this period. Thanks very much to the opportunities that were there. All of this, of course, because of the God money. As we know, I believe it was one of the Marxists who said that a industrialist turned to him and said, and yet I know the city, say Manchester or Liverpool, is mighty bad, but a great deal of money is made here. And that is something we always bear in mind. All of this will be challenged for interest with nationalism, something that the British, or at least the English, already had as British, but the Scots would only get gradually, and they seem to have a certain amount of it now, even as the Scottish independence movement goes on. Meanwhile, we understand, of course, that this has much to do with, well, I know there are a lot of poor, suffering people, but aren't we proud to be British? So let's just wave the flag. I mean, you can understand that alternative that we turn to. And with nationals often come liberals, little l, because I'm trying to keep this from being the present day. The liberals in that sense have to do with the educated, seeking constitutions, and seeking, as our second president, John Adams, would say, a republic of the wealthy and the educated. And that leaves out a lot of folks, doesn't it? But he wasn't a Democrat, little d. All about being a Republican, little r. Keeping the masses involved with rights, but not the right to be in control. So the liberals. Now, the radicals, or Democrats, little d, are seeking universal, I'm going to use the M word, manhood, suffrage, because we have to get to the 20th century for women to vote, as you know. Doesn't mean that women don't want it in the 19th century, it's just that they don't have it. The radicals want all men to vote regardless of their income. Socialists want, gasp, the government to take responsibility for those who are not able to fend for themselves. And of course, a lot of this is connected to labor movements and the mass of people, as we know in cities today, who are not employed or don't have any resources and all the rest that we see and know about in our cities. But interestingly, I think, and we'll have a lot more to say about this, is a peace movement. Even as early as the pre-World War I days, and that absolutely fascinates me because we always think about pacifism, and for those of us of a certain age, we think of Vietnam War and all of that. But in preparing this summer, come across so many groups and organizations that would seek, based on their religious faith or not, based on this idea of working for world peace. Obviously, 1914 would not be a happy year for them, but it was interesting that at the same time we have their military counterparts. Ironic, isn't it? Even paradoxical that you have a peace movement. At the same time, you've got technology moving forward to make war even more terrible. And we will see examples of smaller wars before World War One, where people go as quote unquote observers, just like with their notebooks and pens taking notes, because you know what they're doing? Previews of coming attractions. Isn't that awful? But that was it. They're just getting ready and thinking about how the weapons going to work and how's everything going to be. Oh, so they were talking about it. I mean, it's a surprise when it happens, in a way. But they knew this time, and we're going to get them. So we're bad, we're super bad. Yeah, that sort of thing. Okay. I brought this map because it just blows my mind. Because you always think of a very different map in 1914 when the war starts. And I almost did, and I said, no. I cannot do that. That would be wrong. I've got to show them a pre-map. It's like a before and after. It's like, and you say, gosh, this is not like 1914 at all. And you are very right. A lot's going to happen. They're like two very important countries that are going to appear that are not there. And you say, I know. One starts with G, yes. And one starts with I. Yes. I thought, you clever people, Germany and Italy aren't there. Isn't that amazing? I always love to point out Germany and Italy are younger than the United States. And it's really mind-blowing because what you have all those states. And look at Russia, just as big. And it just keeps on, like we want the Tigers to push. And you say, but where's Poland? No Poland. Poland's coming to a room near you, but not yet. It's an ideal we carry with us. Like for you, Bohemian Czechs. Yes. So you have your ways. And Austria, it's just big. And you say, but that's not the sound of music, is it? You're right. Take it back 100 years. Yes. And we're big and we're bad because we're the Austrian Empire, the Habsburgs. And that's the deceiving part about maps. It all looks so nice, doesn't it? Just you get your Crayolas and you can get your big empires and you're thinking, wow, that's really serene and peaceful. And it wasn't like that at all. But on a map it is. The Austrians rule over lots of territory, and that has a lot to do with family inheritance, doesn't it? You get this, and the family gets that. They even have lands in Italy, as we know, what will become Italy. So, yes, it's just like we collect a little here and a little there, and it's quite nice. The French in 1850 are still sort of a republic. They have a certain Republican president who is dreaming about being like his uncle. We call him Napoleon III, don't we? Yeah. So we know that this is, in case you're keeping count, this is the Second Republic, okay? We're on number 5. We have been since 1958, but so I think we got it this time. I think we're going to last. I mean, that's a long time ago. So, but this is the Second Republic. So that's fine. And then, of course, look at all those German pieces. Yeah. And you say, Prussia. Yes, you know how this is going to come out. But let's give a hand to the Bavarians. They're good Catholics, and it's beautiful, and they drink a lot of beer, don't they? Down there, Munich, put it on your tourist ideas. And then we're going to talk, let's go south, the Ottoman Empire. And of course, we know how significant they are, but they have, shall we say, aging problems, and they are losing limbs rapidly. So, and losing limbs, not a good thing. So we will see that too. But the lack of an Italy and the lack of a Germany are the 2 points that I want to make to you to be aware of in the second half of the 19th century before World War I and what we're going to. All right, Sherry. I love these maps. I don't know where it disappeared to, but at least you can see more or less what how this, where you see land, like, and again I'm thinking of the Queen now, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and you'll recognize a lot of these areas, and how that became the empire. Obviously, all of this came about gradually, but by the second half of the 19th century, it's coming big time, these various territories with various degrees of rights. No Commonwealth, empire. And remember, Elizabeth's predecessor, Queen Victoria, was Empress of India. And if you didn't know, she would let you know, because she's never been there, but she loved to tell people that she was the Empress of India, which, of course, a title that Parliament provided her. So they are a major imperial power, and wonderful to rule over all these folks, but what are we going to do when we can't even manage the Irish? Yeah, the Irish question, as it was called. And it's not something we think about like maybe over a long weekend, or like, it's like, this is a 24/7 question. I don't think they ever stopped. Did you notice that King Charles III went to Belfast? I think it was yesterday. It's like, if they're going to keep Northern Ireland, we better, he needs to get on it. Yeah, because don't you think that the Irish are going to want to say it's a good time to let us have the rest of it? I don't know. But that is a major issue. And a major issue that involves a lot of violence, because a lot of Irish people live in England, thanks to industrialization and trying to get jobs. We all know about the flood of Irish people to the United States because of economic needs, and the same would hold true of England. The question of women's rights and voting, and we all know about suffragettes, I trust, from the American history, and the Americans, by and large, have to pay tribute to their sisters in Great Britain, because they are both involved in protests, and protests that will take often violent forms, which will lead to the death of some suffragettes. Some of you may have heard of the story of the woman who actually was killed by a horse because she was protesting by attending some race with all of the important parliamentary leaders there, and she ended up a victim. Imperialism. Britain was relatively free, and so some people thought it was good, and some people thought it was bad, and so there were protest. Obviously not as much as they're going to be in the future. But even in the 19th century, the question about, what was it, Rudyard Kipling said, that the rule of the white man and all of that, there was already questions about what was the purpose of imperialism and how had the British done it. So there were certain issues, as there would be issues about the rights of people who worked and the role of unions. Remember, there was a time by the late 18th century when they had laws called the Combination Acts, which you couldn't even have a get-together if you worked. It was like the first unions came about because they finally decided to let them get together, I guess, for something like this, or like Ollie, but basically they decided that if they would promise not to go on strike or act ugly, they could get together. And from there, of course, unions grew in terms of their abilities and power. So it started off slow. Meanwhile, with all of these territories, the British internationally had both friends and enemies. I dare say more enemies than friends. But I thought when I saw French, Germans, Americans, Japanese, they were the ones that I found the most appealing and most significant. I mean, if you don't make the hate list on terms of the British, I mean, you know what? It's hard to be number one. And let's face it, I mean, a lot of us are Americans. So we have that go red, white, blue, we're super bad. I get that. But the Brits were there first. And so the idea is everybody wants to take down number one. And so there are these people. And let's look at number one, Lord, the French. Talk about love, hate. Can't get with them, can't do without them. I mean, it's like they're right there across the English Channel, but could you imagine an England without a friend? I don't know. Maybe they'd like to try, but that is quite a relationship. And the Germans, well, ooh, another subject. Yeah, and it's coming. It's coming. Americans, and finally the Japanese, because as we will see, the British and Japanese will become quite involved with each other, a relationship that ultimately will have to be broadened to keep the Americans happy. So we will see that. Now, Sherry, I'm ready. Oh, now we have it. Look at the French Empire. I said, I want them to get a map too. You know, I don't want you to think I'm just such an Anglophile that I don't respect others. Yes, I do. I want to give these people their due. And you say, wow, that's a lot of West Africa. Shoot, yeah. And when it starts growing, it's like our kudzu. I mean, you just keep on going more and more and more. And then, of course, a question of how do we keep it and what do we do with it, right? Got a little Latin America, but nothing much to speak of. All in all, they are still dealing with how do you have an empire and you possess liberty, equality, and fraternity. There will be some issues there. We understand that because when they acquire these, sometimes I have an example of a French leader, and you can imagine they're probably as bad as the British about. They holler at each other during a session because the French leader is talking about, oh, guess what? I just found out we've conquered another territory. And some people in there are screaming back at him about, how can we do this? What about the Marseillaise? What about freedom and all that? And so, yeah, there's sharp division, but I noticed they didn't end it because it was too valuable. And then there's the question of Germany. It's always on our mind. Oh, those French, they think about Germany a lot, don't they? I mean, it's not like, oh, shoot, German, Schmerman. I mean, let's just enjoy being French and forget about them. No, I don't think we can do that. It's always with us, and not in a good way. And so we understand that with the reality of Germany as a next door neighbor as of 1871, we're always going to have to think about that regardless of other problems. And there are plenty of those. Some of you will know about the Dreyfus affair, when a Jewish military officer will be accused of being a spy, and he will be convicted of spying on behalf of the Germans, and the whole thing is going to be a blown up anti-Semitic act. And Dreyfus will end up serving time on Devil's Island, years before he's exonerated, thanks to a kind of movement on his behalf. The significance for us is that it regards, I don't mean to be present, but it divides the sharp divisions in the society of that day. And you think, shouldn't they be more concerned about Germans? Yeah, but they got problems at home too. So this is a very, very serious matter. Okay, Sherry. The Tsar, the Russian Tsar, it was said, first created the term sick man to refer to the Ottoman Empire. And I think what he meant was that thanks to all of the problems that this Turkish Empire was having, that then the rest of us need to move in, which is a very sad thing to think about, like buzzards or vultures or that sort of thing. But this is an international reality. The Ottoman Empire is not young. It has been around a long, long time. The Ottoman Turks, luckily for you, you won't have to hear about it here. But I just accept it from me that the Ottoman Turks have been powerful for centuries. And that empire was a Euro-Asian empire. And as such, their authority was on the wane. And then came a group that are known in history as the Young Turks. And these people want to boost the Sultan's government, sort of reinvigorate the Turks so they can keep controlling all this territory. Because look at all this territory. As all of us came of age, I mean, Turkey's Turkey. We don't remember, because some people, you know, I still have people ask me, say, are Arabs and Turks friends? I said, indeed not. I said, you just ask one. Do you want to hang out? And of course, part of this has to do with the fact that the Turkish people ruled over the Arab people for a long time. And it will be only this period, the 20th century, when the Arabs begin to get their freedom. And I don't need to remind most of you about the 1990s. And of course, the significance of Eastern Europe. Remember Bosnia? Remember all that? Some of. So we already know the problems. Now, everybody's interested in this empire that's on its deathbed. And instead of being there to have a vigil and to express love, they're there for the reading of the will, like one of our murder mysteries. Yeah. Oh, if you do murder mysteries, you know about when those people come, they're not nice people because they're there for filth of lucre. Yeah. And that's exactly these powers. You say, do you mean it's about black gold? So you say on the Beverly Hillbillies, black gold. Yes, we understand. Yes, the industrial possibilities of raw materials and all of that. Russia. And they're still there, and they are very interested, as we know, in France and Britain. So they're all involved in the future of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, Sherry. Speaking of which, there it is. And you said, but I'm looking for Ukraine. Well, you keep looking. It's not going to be there. It will come to a map someday. Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there to introduce Ukraine, but not today. The Tsar's government was a fine one to be talking about the Ottoman Empire being sick, because the Tsar's government needed a lot of vitamins too, because it was not good. It's fair to say, as many of you know, that Tsarist Russia was non-industrialized, and in a word that is not used so much anymore, was somewhat backward. There were westernizers, but they tended to not get a lot of attention. Westernizers or little L liberals who talked about voting and let's have a parliament and all of that. What was Russia like? I'll tell you, mostly agricultural, mostly peasants, very few cities. And in all, the Tsar's government considered themselves answerable only to God. You say, well, that was probably neat in the earlier times, but what about now? Didn't go down quite as well. And so when there were revolts, and there would be, as we're going to see, the Tsar's government agrees to, believe it or not, what they still have might be functioning in Moscow as I speak, a Duma, the Russian word for parliament. And there is a Russian Duma. I'm sure, well, I hope it's a bit more effective than it would have been in Tsarist Russia in 1905-06. Maybe not. But it was there, and I would imagine most of the people in the Duma were what we would call Western types, who were probably, they spoke to each other in English or French, and they were what you call fancy people. You know, they read their Jefferson, or, you know, this sort of Western American and British greatest hits, and they were going like, what about Russia? What about the Tsar? You know, and they said, whatever. You know, they were basically Westernizers. These are the liberals. Do we want the peasant? Are we into PP, peasant power? No. They just keep working and we'll take care of things. And again, this is probably not satisfactory to various people, but you have anarchists who, like today, use terror, they think, to create ultimately a situation that the liberals go away and they can enjoy power, presumably on behalf of peasants. I put enemies on other sides. I mean, certainly we have enemies that among Russia itself. I imagine there were plenty of Poles who didn't appreciate Russia. But that notwithstanding, I just thought it was very interesting when you think of Japan on the one side, and then you think of the Ottoman Empire to the south. You're aware, of course, of some very, very interesting neighbors. And I would not call it something, howdy neighbor, good to be with you, because I think this is very, very definitely not of that case. And of course, much of it has to do, as you know, with the Black Sea and their desire to control it and how important it is for them. And then there's the question of Japan. Because I told you, despite my best efforts, I can't stay away from non-European territories. And here is an obvious case. Okay, Sharon. But before, I just love to show you the Austrian Empire. It is just a garden of delights. Look at all, and you see all those different areas that are in colors. And it's just like, you just don't know what you might grab for. And you say, are these all German-speaking territories? I think not. I would not go up to a Hungarian and say, German speaking here, because they are Hungarians and they have their own language and they have their culture. And do I need to mention? I don't think so. All of these various Slavic peoples. And you say, well, how do I know if it's part of the Austrian Empire? Well, look at all the colors. And you say, oh, it's so beautiful. Does that mean everybody's taking German 101? And no, I mean, that's why maps are such a comfort. You see all the pretty colors and all the areas, and you think, oh, we're all reaching out to each other, having some sort of fraternalism. But I think it was very hard to be a Habsburg at that time and try to rule the country or rule the empire, I should say, because I don't think they necessarily got along. And the question would come about, who's really the biggest and the best among German people? Because the Austrians are Germans, as well as the Prussians and all those other people. And it will come down by the 1850s, the period I started with that question, put up or shut up. Because we don't want any Hungarians. You can keep your Slavs. We're not into that whole thing. No goulash, like Wiener Schnitzel only. So all of this then is to say that the Austrians are going to lose out. We have in 1867, 2 years after Appomattox, right? That an Ausgleich, those of you who are German speakers, forgive me, I tried. Compromise between Austrians and Hungarians. You say, but what about the Slavs? I'm sorry, not today. It's just Austrians and Hungarians. You people be quiet, okay? The Austrians and Hungarians mean, in essence, that they are going to enjoy relative equality. We have two capitals. The Austrian emperor is now king of Hungary. And they really go through the whole routine that you can't. I think it's kind of like French and English in Canada. I mean, even Stephen, I mean, you're supposed to do it all the way because Austrians had, normally been, and now those Hungarians are saying, now look, you people, you straighten out. We're just as good. We're up there. And then those poor little Serbs or something like that said, what about us? Can we? And then, So all of that we understand that this will be Austria-Hungary. Have to get all new stationery, calling cards. They had computers back then. They would have the website, Austro-Hungarian website. And that will be the case, in case anyone asks you or you're on a quiz show, 1918. 1867 to 1918. So that's the life of Austria-Hungary, unless you're in history. And then you can, I know there's so many of these little moments that are precious to us. Especially if you're into Hungarian history and they have been independent. So they've got all these ethnic groups, and you can say they are not asked what their opinion is, or how can we share, or how can we be involved. No. But you understand that this is all about Austria-Hungary. So, Sherry. Oh, I love this map. Again, so big on the colors and the parts. And I know many of you have been there and you are well aware. We're looking at parts of Italy for any who are interested in tours. We haven't got to Germany yet, so yeah. Won't you sit down? I've always wanted to be an usher. Have you got one too?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I-85 South is just crazy.
But we have, yeah, okay. You got somewhere to sit. You need speed. You'll break all laws. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm very concerned about laws. All right. Bringing. Sure.
The clicker out there will work.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I thought
You have the option.
I didn't know I had the option. The combination of these different parts makes an interesting story in itself, which again, I could certainly give an hour or more to, which I will not. But I do think it's interesting to note of telling them about when you look at Italy and all the different colors, because if you go south and then you go north, the people are very different and have very different attitudes about each other. It's not always positive, except Olympics or something like that, and they can all wave flags. But the idea, of course, is that the areas have very different histories and very different traditions. And of course, because of our own historical interests, look at the red part. Yeah. The States of St. Peter. Yes. Popeville. Yes. I mean, you will understand, of course, that these territories historically had been church lands. We have bills. And so all of that was the Pope. It doesn't mean that it was all well behaved and administered, but it means that technically the church enjoyed jurisdiction over those lands. And if you say, but sir, come to the Pope, sir, we decided to go national. We want to all go big eye. We bring out our Italian shirts. No. That was very nice. And remember, they're all Catholics, right? They're not going to say like, well, we have religious differences. No, not really. Technically, these are all Catholic rules. So technically, the Vicar of Christ should be followed in this. That doesn't mean he will be, but it'll take time, a lot of time for this to resolve itself. In this case, the area in the north, and I think it's somewhat ironic. You see I call it Band-Aid looking group, that Piedmont, Sardinia, that in fact will be the area that will be the uniter over the areas that Venice, and you see Milan, all of those huge, see Florence, and you think all of those major territories, and you're thinking, too bad we couldn't be the ruler, but I guess Cavour, he was the firstest with the mostest. He just had the most of the influence and the ability to bring the parts together. That didn't mean they liked it, but they were more or less put in a position that they had no choice. And so it's like the bad children coming together and saying, okay, So, and of course, when you see the yellow, you think of the Garibaldi, many of us, the great adventurer, spent so much time in Uruguay and elsewhere. Quite the adventurer, the lover, quite the, what you call, Italian nationalist, very romantic. And all of these territories being brought together. But as I say that, you will understand these are territories that we're glad we're Italian. So we like each other, but we don't love each other. But we like you in comparison with somebody outside, So it's a strange part. And, the Italian nationalism, it's fair enough, is based on the fact of necessity. And of course, the people up in Piedmont, Sardinia, who now become the leaders of Italy, are going to wait a while and keep talking to the Pope and his officials and so. Sir, we just love you so much. You were the heir to St. Peter, and we just follow you everywhere. You just kiss your foot, that kind of thing. But finally, they get tired of that, and they move in to Rome. It's pretty hurtful because that is Popeville, right? I mean, that's downtown Rome. And what do we do then? I'll tell you exactly what we do. The big E, excommunication. Damn you. And you say, ooh, yeah. But if you say you're sorry, we'll undamn you. Tell you, it is really odd, though. He will be the king of Italy, will be under ban of excommunication until we reach a little up that. And then, but feelings are riding high. That's how Italy is going to be created. And it's rough, but we have plans. And maybe that's a way to make you get more excited about being Italian. Sort of like, instead of just having a pep rally, can't we do something? And we're going to say, yeah, we're Italy. We're big. We're bad. That kind of, I mean, you think the Renaissance would be enough for me, Just go to Florence and you say, I'm satisfied. Just a little Raphael, Michelangelo, but they want to, we stand up. Yeah. You take that, Albania. It's that sort of thing. Very interesting. Oh, God. Okay, here it comes. You knew it had to. Those Germans. We waited so long. We don't have to go through the history of the Holy Roman Empire. I know you're excited. Because I could take you back to the Hohenstaufens in my day. I know. I knew you'd bring him up. Yes. But yeah, I'm strictly modern. Otto von Bismarck, Mr. Modern Germany, and what we call the Second Reich. And for those who don't already remember, the First Reich would be the Hohenstaufen Empire, the Holy Roman Empire that ended with Napoleon. Oh, yeah, that's a name we don't bring up in German households. He was very ugly to us. So, Bismarck, the prime minister of the state of Prussia, is considered the founder of this Second Reich. And, that's the relationship between monarch and minister, as we found out the last few days of last week, between the Queen and her minister. Because the new prime minister, she is in charge now of the government, and that's the way it works in the Germany of this period. And it's a question not of Queen Elizabeth II, but a question of King William I of Prussia. But thankfully, he recognized the brilliance of his servant, Bismarck. And he was more or less accepting his influence, even when he disagreed. It won't be so with his grandson, William II, but by that point, I think Bismarck rather, was probably getting ready for retirement, so it was okay. But let us say that as the chief minister of Prussia, the obstacles for German unification, and remember, this was to be a Prussian-led unification. It's not like all Germans are equal. No, this is an Orwellian. Some Germans are more equal than others. And the most equal are called Prussians. And we capitalize the P, big time. So this is to be a Prussian-led, and it's mostly, of course, by fighting some wars to eliminate those who, shall we call them, obstacles. And that would include the Austrian Empire, Bismarck defeating Austria, and then saying, we really care about you very much. There's been some hurt, but we don't want, you folks in Vienna are very special to us. So it's the idea of getting along with them, but not so much in the case of France. In fact, not at all in France. We beat them and then we beat them again. We beat them down. The more I read about this, I always think what could have been going on in Bismarck's mind. It's like, how do you keep the French when you beat them down like this? Do you ever really think the French are going to say, oh, they're not going to accept this. They're just waiting. So there's no effort to, like, we've had differences with you, but now we want to be your friend. No, it's never there. With the Austrians, yes. More even the Hungarians. But the French, I think not. Oh my gosh. The picture that so many of you will recognize, I'm sure, is that of the crowning of William I as German emperor instead of being the king of Prussia. I mean, you don't stop being king of Prussia. We're not giving up anything. We collect titles. We love titles. Particularly if they have income. So yeah, he's just going to be German emperor. That is to say, William. And that means we're taking Otto along because he will be German chancellor. But all the others will be kings too. You can be a king, you know. So we have all the kings, and they're there. Everybody comes. Oh, and they're nice of the French to let us borrow, you know, like this nice room. The Auburn is allowing us to meet it. Got the French. But I'm expecting that they didn't ask the French for permission. Yeah, hurtful. I think they just kind of took it. They said, we'll let you know when we're. You think the French were resentful? Yeah, pretty much. But anyway, it was there at Versailles. All of the people you see, well, I mentioned this. His son, who's actually married to one of Queen Victoria's daughters. Forget it. I'm sorry I brought it up. It's interesting to think about all of the connections. So William, and there is Bismarck down there, and you see him there in the white coat, like a stage your mother. Yeah, I planned all of this. He's a star. He's there, see him there with the yellow sash. And yeah, he's there. You say, well, why doesn't he get the Senate? No, he's the director producer. So now, but you stand up there because you're the royalty. So you're German emperor. And German emperor in the Second Reich means that we preside over all these other kings. And you're thinking, I wonder how that Bavarian felt about it. I'm not so sure. Mixed feelings, I suspect. Not only were they of a different area, very different, Bavaria and Prussia, but of course religion too, Catholic and Lutheran. So everybody says Germans are totally unified, really probably hasn't been over there. I mean, these are very different areas. And there was a question that we would almost call, sounds odd, so many of us as Southerners talk about states' rights, because that would be a major issue in Germany until probably Hitler, who ended all of that. But let's not get ahead of the story. Let's just appreciate the events at Versailles that I'm sure that the Paris people were not excited about. Now, are we going to stay at Versailles? No, we've got things to do at home. So next train to Berlin, right? We are going to move on. So what are the costs for France? Well, not only the humiliation, but there'll be a new government. The emperor, known as Napoleon III, will be retired. He'll be retired to Britain. London's kind of like the retirement city of the day. It's like whenever you lose positions, you go to London. The bank probably has your retirement there, you know, all your savings. And there will be a German army of occupation. And you can imagine who's going to pay for that. It won't be the Germans, it'll be the French. So it'll be a French army of occupation. The French government collapses, and there will be a new French Republic. Oh, yes. And you see what's red? Just rip us apart. Alsace. Beautiful, beautiful if you ever go over there. Really amazing. You feel like you're in Germany, but you're in France. So, I mean, that's just being on the border, as you know, and many people know. I mean, are you in Georgia? Are you in Alabama, right? I mean, gosh, you Lynette folks, yeah, you know. Very hard. You're torn. I understand. It's okay. So all of that is a very, very interesting issue. And the Germans are going to have Alsace-Lorraine until World War I. And boy, if you were German, get out of Alsace-Lorraine, because we're getting it back. But it's an interesting question of how important that is. We get over the money. You know, money comes and goes, armies of occupation and all of that. Not Alsace-Lorraine. We're not forget. We think about the morning and when we get up. I love this. Puck was a British humor magazine that was published during the 19th century. And I thought it was so interesting because not only of the making of the male and female imagery there, but also that this would be such an important issue. The idea being, and there's 1898, so you can get the idea that they are still fighting and fussing about Alsace-Lorraine. And there's Alsace-Lorraine. They are the beautiful maidens. And then we have the nasty Germans. Now, over here, of course, our brave knight trying to save it. So it didn't go away, but I just thought this kind of genderizing. This says, by the way, you were trying to read it, a new legend in an old dress. But that is the idea of how they were trying to make the point. And again, I think it just indicates that even back then, this had become a major issue that educated people would know about. If you were to say, in other words, in London, to people who were newspaper readers about Alsace, I think they would know what you were talking about. And I think it's very interesting how important that was, because it's not like we're going to have some sort of rather Franco-German peace meeting, and nobody's going to bring up Alsace-Lorraine. Yeah, I think so. It's always going to come up. But just thought that was worth mentioning. Finally, today, I couldn't resist the Russo-Japanese War. I mentioned to you earlier about before World War I, people had observers. And here is a perfect example. Everybody who was anybody in the, who's who in great power circuit had observers there because they wanted to see. It's like previews of coming wars. It was like, I know, isn't that awful? But it's like, and actually, believe it or not, American nurses went over there to help with the wounded because there were such terrible casualties. This was the war that no one could believe because the Japanese just basically destroyed the Russian forces. Obviously, there's no time to go into detail, but we know that the Russian Navy was virtually decimated, and that this particular conflict helped lead to the end of the Russian Empire. So if you were to have to do think of a blue book essay on all the factors involved in the fall of the Russian Empire. Think of all you would write about this. Because the Russians don't like to lose. And the Russians lost. And they lost in an embarrassing way. I mean, this was just as thorough as you can get. But I'm interested, of course, because of the American role. But before we get to that, I love these old illustrations of 19th century Japanese people. Obviously, they are of the, what would you think, upper middle class, maybe? And they are going all the way west. As of, I wonder how many people, maybe young scholars who are in school now know about Millard Fillmore, the president. Do you think? Or not? Okay. I can dream. Yes. Spend a lot of time doing that. And so the idea being that after American intervention, the Japanese began to open up, and this is one of the results. I always like to say to people, we can still be Japanese inside, but we will be Western outside. And that will include Western titles like Baron and Duke and so forth. It involves clothing like this. It will involve the Industrial Revolution, which they do quickly, which the British take about a century to do, and basically make themselves a major power. Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a mighty nice place. If I want to do a See America First, I always love to recommend going to New Hampshire. It's very beautiful up there, and they have lovely summers. I guess a lot of you all want to go see the leaves, but I enjoy the summer and the temperate weather up there. In any event, Portsmouth along the coast. Now I was going to, downtown Portsmouth, and I didn't bother people or get in trouble with the police, but I wanted people to say, "Where's your Chamber of Commerce office? I wonder if they know about the treaty." Okay. I know, but I have to be careful because I can get in trouble doing these things. But yeah, it's like the Treaty of Portsmouth is very, very important. And I found the right places to go. Here in Maine, because Portsmouth is right there on the coast, and the Maine border is right. So the base where the negotiations took place were actually in Maine, but we always think of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And you see the big old teddy bear. He's right there in the middle. Though they know about Theodore. Yeah, no. Oh, God, I get discouraged. All right. Yeah. So basically, he decided, and I think for a combination of reasons, I think he was afraid of the Japanese, the yellow peril, so-called, the threat of Asia to, or Japan in particular, to American interests there. So welcoming for the Russians, he asked them to come over. I mean, he had a country to run, so he was not there every moment, but he brought them there, and then, we have a photo op, and then off he goes to Washington. But there were Americans there, and these negotiations, which took place with the Russians, just totally messed up there in that part of their world. agreed to a peace that was very favorable to Japanese interests, shall we put it that way. It's amazing when you see these two, if you see the Russians, those two Russians, and you think they are the faces of doom because it's like there ain't gonna be some golden parachute. Yeah. I mean, we are really lost out here, and who knows what will come afterwards. But the Treaty of Portsmouth is very important because that proclaims to the Westerners that now a non-Caucasian power, Japan, is now in a position of great leadership. And we are going to see that as time goes on. I hate this term, but since we've all learned it in school, alliance system, because a system, this is not. These are just relationships based on political opportunism. Because I grew up believing, oh, they cared about each other. You know, what is it they say now? They bonded. I always loved. I think, yeah, right. The triple alliance, but at least I got my colored mail. I'm always excited when I find the right color. You know what I mean? That moment of triumph. And you see the red and blue. And you say Italy. Well, what does Italy care about this? I think it's because Bismarck was trying to balance between Austria and itself. So anyway, Italy probably doesn't like France, because they didn't like Austria either, because there were a lot of Italian speakers. But I think they hated the Austrians less than the French. So they joined in this Triple Alliance, and the Triple Alliance basically means if somebody attacks you, then we really care about you. You know? We'll see about that. And then the Triple Entente meaning understanding, is a looser relationship. And these relationships, of course, are formed by people who are mad at someone or another. And in this case, it's obvious they're pretty angry with the Germans. It has nothing to do with Japan, but it definitely has to do with the neighbor between. And that is to say, the Russians and the French, and they're going to say, well, they don't come out and say it. We wouldn't like you, except that we hate Germans. In fact, they say we have a lot. We care about each other. You say, what would the French Republic, the Third Republic, why would they care about the Russian Tsar? Well, oh God, cliche, it's coming. Politics make strange bedfellows. I knew it. I had to come out. I'm sorry. It just escaped. The British, they're a little hesitant. Yeah, they had a fairly good relationship with Japan, but I don't know if they really wanted to hang out too much with the French and the Russians. I think the Germans caused that to a very great extent. The Germans posed, as the British saw it, such a threat to them militarily. Even though British and Germans were intermarried and had so many connections and so forth, but that's not the same thing. So the British eventually would join into what's called this Entente. Again, the whole idea of the system is very dubious to me. But they have relationships, and relationships that tend to be more binding as time goes on. And so we end up, you say, but that's not the way it was in the alliance system. Well, that's the problem. The Germans and the Austrians are going to end up calling Rome and saying, we're gonna have a war, y'all want to join on in? Italians are gonna say, yeah, call us next year. Maybe we'll be ready for you. We've got some other projects and we, yeah, right. So if they had sat out the whole war, they would have done a lot better. But they will not be involved, so they reach out to the Turks in the Ottoman Empire and they say, I bet you don't like those Russians. And they say, no, we do not. And they said, you could be our friend. We think we're going to like you. So they join, and Bulgaria will join because of their own interests against the nation of Serbia, which all of us will remember from the 1990s. So those are the Central Powers, so-called, and then I guess the map will make it clear that if you are lilac, you're neutral. And so those are the neutral. A lot different than World War II, isn't it? Think about it. Go north. And I know you're thinking, where's Finland? I miss my Finland. Sorry, we're not there. We're part of the Russian Empire. But we've got Sweden and Norway and Denmark, and they are neutral. And you know why they're neutral? Making money. It's good to be financially successful. And Switzerland, yeah, it's not new. Somehow they've always managed. Spain and Morocco. So there are many, many territories that I would call sit at World War I, but by and large, the British, the French, and the Russians seem to have the overwhelming amount of support in a war which ultimately will be successful for them. And at the end of the war, there will be no more Russian Empire. There will be no more Austro-Hungarian Empire. There will be no more Ottoman Empire. And we talk about a new world a-coming in 1918 when this ends. And it does that. The world itself, and I thought this was kind of interesting, that you see how much of the world is involved, and you say, wow, look at Africa. Well, yeah, I mean, it's mostly ruled by the West. So, of course, it's in the war. They don't have a choice. Nobody asks these folks, y'all want to fight? Yeah, you're involved. All of this. And then you see the purple area, and you're aware the Germans actually had some African lands. They don't have it much longer because it's going. But all of these territories that you see will be on the same side, and that is the Allied side. And they will have all of those resources. And do you think those territories in Africa, East and West Africa, that are German, are going to stay German? That's the end of that. But all of that is going to change naturally. So this idea of, well, this was 1917, because of course, the big WW, Woodrow Wilson, decided he may have kept us out of war in November of 1916 when the election was, because you know what they did, these politicians. But by 1917, it's changed. And so we're going to war. And of course, then who should we greet? I just love this particular picture of President Wilson. Now, let me see if I can show him to you. If you can see him, can anybody see him way back there? Yeah, can you see him back there? He and Edith Galt Wilson, second Mrs. Wilson. after the death of Freshman. It was no autopsy. We don't need an autopsy. It was real. But yes, this nice girl from Rome, Georgia, first Mrs. Wilson, but another story, another lecture. Yeah. The idea is he's the man. Why is he a man? Mr. America. We wanted someone to save the world, and now we have Thomas Woodrow Wilson, the great Princeton professor in Preston, governor of New Jersey, and now world savior. I'm building this up, aren't I? All the way to Paris. Because this guy has such an ego. I mean, I'm a Wilson fan, don't get me wrong. But he has such an ego that I think he believes in his own publicity. Now, this is a guy who lost both houses of Congress in 1918, the elections. But he crosses over the Atlantic and he goes to this conference in an unprecedented way, knowing that he would face two Republican-led houses in Congress. And how many Republicans did he carry with him? None. Not too bright, but he believed he had something greater than there, and it was truth with a capital T. You know how I said little letter T? No, this is big T. His father was a clergyman, so definitely he learned there was a truth, and he was going to bring about a new world that would be so much better. And you know what? The Great War would be the last war. We're tired of it. So that's where we're going to start next time. Can I answer any questions? Or I've actually made it. I'm so proud. I flew it. I'm so sorry. If anybody need, I failed to get my break, but I think we're over breaks. Yeah, all breaks were abolished. Yeah, more.
The Habsburg Empire or the House of Habsburg
Yeah,
in power for a long time or a short time?
yes.
Long time.
Back in my day, that was when they started the 13th century. So I mean, that's a lot of centuries, those folks.
I probably learned it before and forgot.
Yeah, I should.
But
The Habsburgs, yeah. I think there's some people, you know, at the end of the Cold War, I think some Habsburg walked up and said, I want Hungary. Can I have Hungary? You know, they thought because the communist people get Hungary back.
No, we're going.
No, sad, but anyway, thank you all, and please come back.
Right on that.
What have you been doing?
I did something in the back of my leg. I might run. I'm too old to run. No, but I'm going to still do it.
I do that.
I will see you. Do you